Hello, everyone. It's lovely to see you all here this evening. My name's Caroline Spencer. I'm a Trading Standards Officer with Heart of the Southwest Trading Standards. Um, I'm just going to do a short introduction to our main speaker, who's going to be Mark Moore. And also just to let you all know that this meeting is being recorded, so we hope that's okay. And I'm just going to very quickly run through some of the paid for services that Trading Standards now does, so that you're aware of them. For those of you that don't know, we do a primary authority scheme, which is basically a government-backed scheme, and it enables businesses to form a partnership with Trading Standards, where we can offer business consultancy style regulatory advice on a range of areas, including product safety, food standards, fair trading, metrology, etc. We also have a pay-as-you-go scheme for people that don't want to form a partnership or think not sure if that's the right thing for us yet. We have a pay-as-you-go scheme, so if you want bespoke regulatory advice, then you can always approach us. We always give you a quote beforehand, so there's no unexpected costs. All the links to this information that I'm saying at the moment, there are links to everything in the chat, so that you can go and have a look, take the link down and go and have a look at a later date. So that's primary authority, pay as you go. We also have a buy with confidence scheme. Now, this was set up as a partnership between Trading Standards, and many years ago when we started it, it was originally so that consumers could identify good traders that they could go to that have made a commitment to trade fairly with their consumers. So that's buy with confidence. We've also recently set up the Made in Devon scheme. By its name, it's all about people that, businesses, traders that work in Devon, and make things in Devon. So it could be food products, it could be, wood, etc. But again, there's a link in the chat box for people to get further information on that. And the last thing I just want to mention is that we also have, or we work in conjunction with Heart of the Southwest Growth Hub, and they can offer advice, signpost, etc., for services, grants that may be available to start up businesses, and also those businesses that want to expand and think, how do we go about doing that? But as I say, there are links to everything I've just mentioned. It's all in the chat, so that you can click onto those and go and have a look later and see if there's anything there that you think actually that would be really useful. So now I will stop blathering on about Trading Standards and the services that we offer, because I know that you're all here for the cyber resilience course. So I'm going to hand over to Mark, and obviously there'll be an opportunity for any questions, etc. at the end. So by all means, do ask. Meanwhile, enjoy the course. Thank you. Over to you, Mark.
Thanks, Caroline. Evening, everybody. Thanks for coming along. Just to make it really clear, it's now after 5 o'clock, which means that if you do have a glass of wine in the fridge, it is okay to get it out at this point, because we're past business hours. I shan't be, but your camera off. So I hope we can make the meeting an enjoyable and profitable one for you somehow. I'm going to spend the next sort of 40 minutes or so talking to you about cyber resilience, and therewith I will get the presentation up on screen and we'll start to run through that. So hopefully you can all see this one. I'm pretty confident you can, because abuse tells me that you can. So what I'm going to run you through over the next sort of 40 minutes or so is, first of all, a little bit about me, which my wife always says is my favourite topic of conversation. Essentially, just to let you know my background out of the Cyber Resilience Centre and why I'm talking to you about this stuff today. I'm going to give you a bit of an insight about what cybercrime looks like. I know there are some fairly kind of sensationalist headlines out there very often, but I want to talk to you about what it looks like for small businesses around our area, which is interesting in itself, I hope. But more than that, I think the really important bit is what you can do about this stuff, because I'm really conscious of very often this kind of discussion is couched in terms of China and Russia and North Korea and things that just feel a bit above and beyond for all of us, if I'm candid. But that absolutely isn't the case. There's a lot that we can all do to become safer. So I want to share some really easy hints and tips with you today. And then the last bit, I guess it's almost a sales pitch, but I'm not going to apologise for it overly. The last bit is about what we would like to be able to do to help you beyond today, because there's inevitably only so much that we can get through on a sort of 30, 40-minute call. And And the goal for me and for the centre is to make sure that you are as best protected as you can be, not just this week, but next week, next month, and next year too. So first up, me. I'm seconded as a police officer. I'm serving superintendent from Devon and Cornwall Police, with a long background in policing stuff and not so much in cyber geek, which I think is probably not a bad thing. My colleague and I have set up the Cyber Resilience Centre, from which we're talking to you today, over the course of the last year or so. And the goal of that is really to protect small businesses and charities across the Southwest region. We're Home Office funded and we're part of a national police-led network. But the centre is here really solely on a not-for-profit basis to look after our regional economy. So small businesses, charities, if you're involved in a charity, and also parts of the public sector that might need us. So thinking, schools, multi-academy trusts, that kind of area. That's really what we're here for. So this always feels like a slightly unusual kind of call, in that there genuinely isn't a sales pitch here that will look to make something from you after the call. It's, our sole purpose is looking after you and trying to protect you as best we can. So I said I'd kick off with a little bit about what cyber crime looks like at the moment. And I always like to start with this slide because I think if anybody tells you that they really do know, they're probably fibbing, and that's a good chance to exit. The real issue with cybercrime is that people don't report it by and large. If you're a small business owner and you are struck down by some kind of ransomware, let's say, you've got a lot on your plate all of a sudden, and probably, although I'd encourage you to report and contact, of course, that probably isn't the first thing on your agenda. If you do report, it's going to take you a bit of time at a point when you're really busy and trying to put your business back together. But also, you might be concerned about what that will do for you reputationally. You might be concerned about your clients becoming aware of it. You might be concerned about the Information Commissioner. No, I don't say that any of those things are reasons why you shouldn't report, but I do say that there are reasons why many companies might not report. And current estimates that probably something between about 1% and 5%, depending on whose maths you read, actually gets reported to an authority. As a bit of an example here, a year ago, the National Cyber Security Centre, or NCSC, set up something called the Suspicious Email Reporting Service. It came about at the start of the pandemic, and it was to give people a really easy chance just to ping off a rogue email and say, I think this is a scam, can somebody do something about it? And in around the first year of its operation, there was something like 6.5 million reports through to that service. And yet, as I look at our local force, Devon and Cornwall, I know that during the course of the last calendar year, 694 reports came through to us from Action Fraud for investigation. Now, that isn't to say that there were only 694 reports. They sift some out at the source, but there certainly weren't 6.5 million. There's a big old grey area there. And so my point is, there's a gap. Just to kind of reinforce that a little bit more, and I promise that this presentation won't be loads of acronyms, but the FBI has something called the Internet Crime Complaint Centre, which looks at not just crime complaints in the US, but also the reporting mechanisms around the world. And just to show what I think is a randomness of those reporting systems, the FBI assessed that the UK, only after them, is the top country at risk of cybercrime. In second place is Canada, but we're 40 times riskier than they are, which I don't know, maybe that has a ring of truth to you. It doesn't to me, quite candidly. And I think that all authorities are struggling really to know what is and isn't fact in this kind of landscape. That said, there are some fixed points. I'm going to try and share some of those with you in a moment. The first thing that I think is really important for us and for you to know is that often in the newspapers we read about big cyber attacks, because big exciting stuff is what always makes the headlines. What's in front of you at the moment is the results of a survey from Hiscox and an exercise analysis they did around the risk relevant to different business sectors. So again, I don't pretend that this is total science, but then again, this is pretty much a global company with a great deal of reach and experience in the cyber market. And they've looked at the kind of likelihood of companies being attacked by cybercrime. They've looked at the impact it would have on their business. They've looked at, inevitably, whether those companies have insurance that covers them or not. And they've factored out a kind of risk score. And you can see the results of that in front of you. So essentially, and perhaps surprisingly, if you are a small business, small or micro, with 1 to 9 people, you're quite a long way ahead of the pack there in terms of the risk to your business. If you're a bit larger, 10 to 49, then your risk starts to decrease. Maybe you've got better IT support at that stage. Maybe you're starting to look at, actually, now I'm larger, do I need to factor in the right insurance policies? And once you start to reach the stage where maybe you've got a small IT team, then perhaps things become a little bit better for you. Although, interestingly, the largest companies may actually find themselves targeted, so they're third place in the list. But my point from this, well, twofold really, as I've said on this presentation before. Number one, if you're a small business, you really are at risk. And number two, if you've got 49 employees, just employ somebody else, because it's probably very much worth it in terms of reducing your risk. So some fixed points I promised you, here they are. Every year the government produces a cyber breaches survey, and it's run by Ipsos Mori based on lots of telephony, phone calls round. So it's pretty much as good as it gets in terms of reliability. Something like 2 out of 5 businesses reported attacks over the course of the last year. Not necessarily successful ones, but attempts. And I would highlight those were only the companies that spotted them. 2 out of 3 companies, medium, large, spotted those attacks. And I think we can all kind of draw our own conclusions as to whether that's because they're better at spotting or more likely to be attacked, or maybe a combination of the two. But what is certain is that for those small businesses, the average cost of those attacks were £8,500 roughly, which is a significant chunk. And interestingly, a Vodafone survey, which is probably slightly less scientific, suggested that kind of bill would have been enough at the time of the pandemic to send about 1.3 million UK SMEs under the water totally. Really good news amongst all of these difficult statistics is from Verizon, which is an international kind of IT provider that looks at security threats across the globe. So they see what's going on in different businesses. And in their experience, around about 3% of cyber attacks were about a vulnerability being exploited. And by that, I mean those kind of difficult system stuff that we just don't get because you and I probably don't code systems. That complicated stuff that's beyond us is okay because it's a real minority. The biggest risk was about people doing things that they could have avoided or could have done to avoid it happening. So 85% of breaches, and really, that's where I want to try and position myself today, that the message to take away is that if you do some stuff, if you know about this stuff, you can hugely reduce your risk. 2 other quick statistics before I move on. The vast majority of SMEs have no cyber cover at the moment. We'll perhaps talk about cyber cover, maybe in the Q&A. I'm certainly not here to sell that, but I do say that if you haven't insured, I ask a parallel question as to whether you've considered the risk and done something about it. If you have, you might not need that insurance or feel that you do, but that statistic does perhaps suggest that engagement levels are lower than they might be. And the final statistic on this screen, again, SonicWall, a big IT provider that operates globally. Since records began, there's been a kind of count of how much ransomware has taken place, that kind of thing that closes your system down and says, give us money before we let you get back onto your system. Last year was a record-breaking year. This year, in the first 6 months, we already exceeded the total from last year. So that suggests that this year is on track to at least double what was already a record-breaking year. So yes, there are lots of these cyber companies that will tell you the world's about to come to an end. But actually, the government statistics and a lot of the information around it does suggest that this is a genuine threat for small businesses. I want to talk to you about some of the stuff that sits underneath the figures and trends, because I think that's really helpful in understanding what your enemy might look like here, actually. The first thing to say, which not a lot of people know, is that criminality is actually business now too, and a very effective one, with franchising and outsourcing and buying in of services and all those things that you probably do in running your own businesses too, I guess. So that if I decide from my study that I want to start running a criminal empire, I can actually go onto the dark web and I can ask somebody to give me a list of email addresses which are current that I could contact. I could ask somebody else to provide me with, for let's say £100, a mock-up of a Lloyd's Bank, for argument's sake, log on page to take your details and your banking information. I could get somebody else to send me the coding that would direct you to that site. So actually, without any kind of knowledge, I can secure all of those services to make this stuff happen. So although very often we read about, organized gangs and state-based stuff in the papers, actually this is really fragmented, and it's probably why it's growing, that you can simply dip in and out as you choose, and it makes it really difficult to handle. The allied to that, phishing got professional. There's only one spelling mistake in that line. Phishing is a kind of term for the scam emails, I guess. And if we looked back a decade or so ago, maybe less, we'd probably all characterize those kind of emails as some sort of panic-stricken message saying, I'm on holiday, there's a medical bill, please send money. But it would be spelled wrongly, wouldn't it? And you'd spot it a mile off 9 times out of 10. That's really changed now. It's changed partly because in terms of the professionalism, you are a lot less likely to see spelling mistakes, because actually people get that that's what sinks their scams. And actually in that business approach, they advertise for English as a first language speakers, so that if I want to target somebody who's a finance manager, I will find somebody that understands the language of finance and that can phrase something appropriately for them. So that's a real risk. This year in the first quarter, something like 40% of all those phishing or email scam attempts actually involved Microsoft log-on pages now to try and get people's credentials. So lots of stuff saying you've got a new Teams channel to join, or log into this to see the invoice has just arrived. That kind of stuff was a real new professionalization and away from the panic-stricken holiday message. Allied to that, the victims have changed over recent years. So we probably would have once guessed that the typical victim looked like maybe somebody that was older, that wasn't as switched on to IT threats. Gosh, we're all growing older, aren't we? But actually, increasingly, the younger generation will live their lives online and very used to and accustomed to swiping their phone to pay for things, trusting apps, and simply just cracking on without worrying too much about the privacy implications. As a result, the 20 to 39 age group is pretty much at the vanguard now of victimhood. So it is those of us that are used to using computers, but we're perhaps trusting what we see too much. Interestingly, the insider threat is growing. I think this is relevant for all of you guys. I'll come back to it later. As part of that business approach, we're starting to see some of the larger gangs now saying, if an individual will come to us and give us access to a company's network, and we'll give them 40% of any ransomware take, or make up the numbers as you will. But the point is, there's potentially a risk from the people that work for you, or maybe the people that worked for you who've just left because they're a bit hacked off or dissatisfied or have an axe to grind. So there's something there about thinking about how you manage the access and security of your systems when people have gone to. Digital footprints, I've said, are clearer. What I mean by that is, I guess we could once have had a conversation, and maybe still could, about the information that you share about yourselves on social media. So the birthday photographs that let me know that your birthday is the 26th of August, or the fact that you tell me that you've gone away on holiday, or where you participated in the quiz that said, my porn star name would be, I don't know, Myrtle Bonnie, because that's my mother's maiden name and my pet's name. Those kind of things are all information that have gone out about you, and a lot of people have put stuff on there. I guess it's almost feels unrealistic to me, and it's a personal view now, to say to many people, don't put anything on social media. And one of the risks is not just the information that you've put out, but the constant background of cyber breaches that mean, for example, a couple of years ago, Facebook was compromised, 11 million UK user details went out there and were released onto the dark web openly, so that your phone number of the time will be public, your date of birth will be public, your full name will be public. link that up to other breaches, parking one earlier this year, your registration number and your car details might be public. All of these things mean that actually, with a bit of research, we can all find out a bit about each other and send each other emails that make it look as if we really do know you. And that's really worth being aware of in terms of, do I trust an email or do I trust a person? As a result of that, linked to it, I think cybercrime is not just the email sent to 1 million people, although that does still exist, but it's very much targeted, because if I can invest 30 minutes and really make one of you think that I do know you, I've got a fairly strong likelihood that you're going to click through, do what I want you to do, and actually compromise your accounts, your information, or your finances. We'll talk briefly about supply chains, which in IT terms are often used to talk about the people that supply a valid risk. But also increasingly, if you want to protect your business, you need to know that the people that you are dealing with are protecting theirs too. I guess let's picture the scenario where medium-sized company A has small company B that delivers their sandwiches. Medium-sized company A has got really, really good cyber security and I can't crack them, but sandwich delivery company B has got virtually none. So I can crack them there, send them through an invoice because they know me, and as soon as they click on that invoice link, I can get into their system. So it's making sure that people around you are safer, and certainly that's an increasing trend starting at the bottom. Ransomware, which I've mentioned, the thing where traditionally we lock your computers down and say the screen will not stop being black until you pay me some money. That's become more complicated and more expensive. Once upon a time, the solution to ransomware was back everything up, and that's still really, really sound advice because it's what gets your business moving again, but it's no longer enough to mitigate that ransomware threat, because very often now what happens on top of that is criminal groups will say, so you can get your systems back up and running, that's fine, but we will release all of your data publicly. So all of your customers will hate you. All of the information that was confidential, you will lose that trust, you will be subject to fines from the ICO. And actually, we've also got some really interesting information from your emails, so we can see about the supplier disputes that are ongoing. We're going to make those public too. We're going to give information away. We've got your IP. So it's far more around extortion now, simply, than we're closing down your systems. And that's a growing threat to be aware of. And the response, of course, is try not to become a victim. Remote working has offered opportunities. Is that coming to an end or not? I'm not sure. It depends which sector you're in, doesn't it? But I guess I'd say that tendency for all of us to see something new on our screens, you need to join this Teams channel, you've got an invite to a meeting, we're much more likely to click on it working from home. But the other thing to consider particularly here is how you or your teams are working from home. So if you're logging into your work computer, that's one thing. If you're logging into your work account from a home computer, that's slightly different, isn't it? Because that home computer, was that used by my kids to download the latest dubious Minecraft expansion pack? I have no idea, but I don't know how secure that computer is, and it's really offered some opportunities for cyber criminals. And I think understanding how your systems are accessed and making sure that you've got a degree of control over that is really, really important. Linked into that, of course, many of us bring our own devices to work, use mobile phones, and we weren't really too worried about those because they were just safe, weren't they? I would say that Android, and actually Apple too, the number of vulnerabilities are growing, the number of apps that aren't as secure as was first thought is becoming more of a thing. And whilst we're all used to working from, I hope, up-to-date systems in work, I guess there's a question, isn't there, about if someone's using a knackered old ancient iPhone or a version of Android that's 6 years old. It does happen, it does present a risk, and it's probably worth considering, where in a way 3-4 years ago it was far less of a threat. So some of the things there about what it looks like now, I guess. So key messages, I said I'd start off with what it looks like, and the things that I want you to take away is that 2 in 5 businesses, this is going to happen to you, it's going to happen to me, it's going to happen to all of us. The issue is, do we spot it? And if we don't spot it, are we in a position to put things right? Most of it is about our people and ourselves. So forewarned, forearmed, we can do a lot of prevention stuff. We just need a bit of a plan. So let's talk about what that plan might look like and what you can do next to try and get a bit safer. So first up, I guess a question really. What can you do? Well, I don't know. What have you done? Because these to-do lists are probably not too complicated. The first thing is, have you checked out what security you've actually got in place? You know, we have a service provider that gives us stuff and a license, but have you actually asked yours questions around what backup means? If they say it's in the cloud, what does that mean? If a data center burns down somewhere, are you still safe? If you were compromised 2 months ago, but you didn't spot that, are all of your backups now knackered? I don't know the answer to that for you, but those are the kind of questions that you probably do need to ask, because if you imagine the screen's going black, that's the real kind of risk for you, isn't it? It's probably really difficult to manage your operations after that. Thinking about your email protections, what's in place, DMARC, if you've never heard of it, and you quite possibly haven't. If you've got a supplier, ask them about DMARC. It's a good kind of filtering mechanism, but what protections have you got for your email? Because that's the main route into the organization. So think about that, ask those questions, and make some choices. Have you thought about some of the government schemes like Cyber Essentials, which I'll talk about a bit more? Have you trained your staff? If 85% of issues are about people, actually making those people aware is a huge step in making yourself safer. So consider that one. I'll come on some ways that you might do that in a moment. And I suppose next couple, have you thought about what happens if stuff goes wrong? So if your screen goes black now, what do? The answer might be, I contact my IT supplier, if you've got one. Where have you got their details? Is it in your inbox? Because if so, you can't contact them now. So have you got it written down somewhere? Have you got a client list somewhere, or is it all stored in your inbox? Have you got your marketing material, or is it all on your hard drive? So thinking about those kind of things, if there was a ransomware request, how would you pay it if it was in Bitcoin? Do you know how to manage Bitcoin? I'm not sure I do. It's all those kind of things where if you really do want a proper continuity plan, you do need to be thinking about some of these aspects in advance. And we'll come on to how you do that and some of the right questions too. And the last one from me, have you maybe considered buying some stuff? I don't say that buying stuff is the right answer, but have you thought about cyber products, insurance products, or have you done anything just to get yourself a little bit more skilled up? Those are all options, aren't there? And I guess asking those questions is a really important first step. Some of the basic things that you can do here and now, I wanted to run through. So the first thing is about passwords. I saw some recent research that suggested something like 92% of people, I think it was, know that using a different password across sites is really quite important. Something like 65% don't, just because it's really hard. They think their head's going to explode, because it's really tough to remember 93 passwords, isn't it? So the answer to that, have a strong and different passwords for each site, and your internet browser will remember that for you. It will automatically suggest one for you. So let it do that, or you can buy separate password managers, which will remember all of your passwords and auto-populate them into any site that you go on. You can find free versions, paid for versions. I'm not going to recommend one. You do a bit of due diligence and check it out. That has to be a better approach than using the same key to every single digital lock that you have, because your risk otherwise is that, you know, there's a small breach of, gosh, I don't know, a Peacock's account that you had 20 years ago. Are they still a thing? And actually that's been breached and you don't find out. But the password that you used for that is also the password that you're using today for your Amazon account, to which your credit card details are linked. That's why you need a different password. So the approach that I take, I let my browser automatically suggest something. It fills it every time that I go into that site in the future. It does it automatically. I don't even know what it is. But if I'm ever on a different computer, or if something goes wrong with my browser, I just click on that link that says I've forgotten, and it sends me a reset, and it sends it to my email account. And my email account, I know the password for that because it's the most important key to my digital vault. I don't forget it, and I don't tell anybody with it. It's unique. So as long as I know my email and my email account, I'm good, and all of my other accounts are too. I wanted to direct you to a site called haveibeenpwned.com, which is on the screen in front of you. Excuse me. It's run by a Microsoft director, and even the FBI feeds into it now with details of cyber breaches. So if you were to log on to that account, or go on to that website and put in your own email address, nothing more, or your phone number, it will tell you about all the times that that account has been breached, and details associated with it are contained on the dark web. That's probably not a concern, to be honest. Somebody from my last call said, gosh, it showed 12 for me. That's fine, unless you are using the same password still across all of your sites that was used in that breach, in which case, make some changes and do it fairly quickly. Two-factor authentication, or 2FA, is a really important part of this conversation. And if you haven't looked at that or heard of it, it's the one thing that I really want you to take away and do from today's call, because it will take you about 10 minutes. It's the thing that most of us have had experience of through banking apps initially, where we did something on the computer, but we got sent a text message or a string of digits or something that we had to input to prove that it was us before we could move money. That second way of proving who you are is really important, because if I've got your password, but not the phone that's given that text code, I still can't get into your account. And you can set up 2FA on all of the big sites now. So if you're running your business not through a website, but through Facebook, for example, put 2FA on it, because we've had an awful lot of calls from people who say, I've been locked out of my Facebook account. They didn't have 2FA in place, and if they had, they'd have been okay. Now that they haven't, they're at the mercy of customer services, Facebook USA, and frankly, good luck with that. It's not a fun experience. So you can set that up on all of the big sites, and I thoroughly recommend that you do it. The way it will work then is, for me, I've got an app on my phone, so I don't have to worry about texts and reception even. What happens is, once I've set that up, it asks for a password, and it will also then ask me for a number of digits. And I check on my phone, and every 20, 30 seconds, those 6 digits change, and I type it in, and I'm away. And I know now that nobody else has got that second key, so my accounts are so much safer. So genuinely, as a small business, please do that around your social media accounts, around your payment accounts. It takes you seconds to do, and it makes you immeasurably safer. Other thing that I wanted to flag up, so I mentioned earlier the suspicious email reporting service from the National Cybersecurity Centre. If you get some dodgy scam emails, send them off to report@phishing.gov.uk. And if you get text messages, send them to 7726, which spells spam on your keypad. What happens then is that the NCSC or your phone providers look into them, and they take down anything that looks like a scam. Last year, I think the NCSC took down something like 100,000 scams and 50,000 websites as a result. They won't come back to you in lots of detail. They get far too many reports, but they will act on it. So it means that if I report something, chances of you falling victim to it are far lower. So please, let's look after each other. Social engineering I mentioned, so this is you giving out information. Just consider not giving out information where you can, but also be really aware that that's a great way for people to get into you. So actually, if you've got an email that really clearly looks as though it comes from your bank, because it's got lots of details in, or your suppliers or your contacts, but don't trust it. If it's asking for money, make personal contact. If it's going through a website, go through the company website that you know first, rather than clicking on a link. It's kind of about not trusting an email, because an email isn't the most trustworthy thing anymore in itself, no matter how convincing it looks. I mentioned the insider threat, so think about, if you've got somebody in your business, have they got access to what they need, or have they got access to everything the same as you have? If they've got access to everything, question whether that's actually required. If it isn't, reduce it. And when they leave the company, remove those accesses in a prompt way. The last thing to mention here, I guess, is around updates. So twofold, both in terms of systems and yourself. The first thing is, when a vulnerability is spotted, great companies like Microsoft will resolve it, yay. And that's what a patch or a minor update is. And you're often asked by your system, do you want to install this update now? If you don't update your systems regularly, you leave that vulnerability open for cyber criminals to exploit, and chances are that sooner or later they will, because that's what they attempt to do frequently. So update your systems, check your own configuration, and make sure that things are automatically updating where they can. And where something asks you, can I update now? The answer is generally yes, or if not yes now, then it's yes tonight, please, when I finish business. And the second thing is your personal updates. I guess if you don't know what the current scams look like, and this is where I hope I can help a bit, if you don't know that, you're far more likely to fall victim. So think about a way to bring yourself up to speed. And again, I hope I can help. A really important thing for you, if you've not heard of the National Cyber Security Centre, don't worry, you're not unique. Something like 1% of businesses quote this as their go-to source, but they're the government experts that really know stuff. If you go onto their site, you can find out loads of things, from what to ask of a service provider, through how to migrate to the cloud, through security for mobile devices. It's kind of all there. But actually, quarter of companies are more happy to pay somebody for this sort of support. But I'm going to give you the NCSC for nothing. Go onto their websites, use them if you need advice, and there's some great stuff there, and it's by the people that genuinely know and are not trying to sell you things. One of the things they do is they offer free e-learning. So a sort of 20-30 minute piece, depending on how quick you are. Government figures suggest that 14% of companies trained their staff in the last year. But actually, for the people maybe you have coming on a Saturday, I'd suggest that should be part of their induction, just how to avoid and understand what spam email looks like, because it isn't taught in schools. Often you can get free training from local police forces, and I can sort of broker some of that for you if you need, so let me know. I guess I made the point earlier about work and home becoming blurred. So actually, all of your people need to be aware. It's not just about what they do whilst in work. It's potentially just about the way that they approach IT security overall and what they're doing on their home computers too. And the last point here, which I think is really important, if somebody, what's the technical term, screws up, don't beat them up when they tell you, because they won't tell you next time. And actually, the real risk is that, in a medium or larger company, people are afraid to say they've done something wrong. They've already let somebody into your system, but they're not now disclosing it. So it's really important to have that open conversation, because we do all make mistakes. On the NCSC site, there are a number of things that might help you. So talk about the exercise in a box. It's kind of anything from 15-minute exercises upwards, which help you to run through some what-if scenarios. Do them over a coffee, do them over lunch every few weeks. I don't know, however works best for you, but they're a great way to think, have I got my cybersecurity where it needs to be? And if you don't know where to start, the questions to ask, it's there for small businesses. There's also a response and recovery guide, which talks you through the kind of questions that you might want to go through if you're thinking about, right, if the screen goes black, what do I do? Some of the questions that you might answer in the process is a framework. You need to do the work, but I think knowing what the work to be done is a great start, and that's there for you too. And the last thing that I want to mention, and although I don't make money from it, if anything, this is one of my strongest sales pitches today. You could get insurance and throw money at stuff. That's a challenge, because the risk around insurance is people say you weren't covered at the end if you hadn't done what you should have done to look after yourself in the first place. So probably just paying won't suffice on its own. Cyber Essentials is a great scheme because it's government recommended and pushed, and it effectively takes you through a number of the basic cybersecurity measures that will get you an awful lot safer. So it asks you all the questions that you need to inquire about. What does my router do? What's my password policy? That kind of stuff. And suggests that it reduces your risk by around 80-25%. There is a cost with that. It costs you £300 to do. So think about it like an MOT test. However, it then comes with free insurance for small businesses up to £25,000. So if you were thinking about chucking a sum of money to your insurers, my strong suggestion is actually do some work to be safer and then chuck some money towards insurance, because it probably won't happen then, and you really don't want it to happen, because cybercrime is not just about the financial loss. So it's a really good thing to consider. If you don't want to spend £300, actually all of the questions are open source, so you can still run yourself through the process, and we can help with that too. Whew, so there we go. What can we help with? Because I keep saying that. So I sort of said at the outset that we are here on a not-for-profit basis and just really to help small businesses. The not-for-profit bit and our funding model means that we can do a bunch of stuff for people for nothing. So for companies that join us and get a free membership, we will give them a bunch of that really easy starter National Cyber Security Centre stuff. and we'll contact you to make sure that it makes sense, to find out if you need anything else and see how you're getting on. Not for a sales pitch, just to make sure that you are managing okay, and if you're not, we'll try and assist. Really importantly, every month we will come out to you to let you know what the latest scams are looking like, the latest things that you need to do to be protected, the latest things you need to avoid, the latest questions you need to ask your providers. So I know that we all get lots of emails. If you only read it 1 month in two, I always say at least you're safe for 50% of the year, and that feels like a great win to me. But we do our best to make it useful, and the feedback that we get is very strongly in that vein. We also run a bunch of free webinars to talk businesses through key topics so that you can approach a local cybersecurity expert, ask what you might think is a daft question, but without fear of shame, and actually without paying for it at the end. So that's not a bad thing, I think, because it's sometimes really helpful to access those experts. We also have, if you want a bit more, the ability to get people in to actually look at your systems for you. So we work with universities across the region, undergraduates through to postgraduate level, ethical hacking courses, and we can get them to test your website and see how vulnerable it would be to the main kind of attack vectors. We can do the same with your internal, external systems. We can run the rule over your continuity plans. We can find out what information is out there about you or your company that could be used to compromise you, or to scam you on email. So all those kind of things, you see them on the screen, we can do for you. We have to ask you to pay for those, because sadly we can't bring people into work with your business for nothing. But the good news is we ask students to come in and we pay them a student rate, so we can make that really, really affordable for you. What they won't do at the end of that is sell you a product or a widget or a thing. They'll tell you how safe you are. They'll tell you what your risks might be, and you can take an informed decision as to what you want to do about that. We also then work with a bunch of trusted partners. So again, gosh, I've been scouting for an electrician today. That's fun, isn't it? You need to know who's good and who you can trust. And that's really tough in cyber because the standards are quite opaque. We work with companies that offer Cyber Essentials and Cyber Essentials Plus, and that means that they know the basics of cybersecurity. All of the companies that you see on the screen in front of you are based around the West Country. We speak with them on a monthly basis. They've all expressed an interest in working with SMEs, and as I say, they know the basics. So I don't pretend that they're necessarily the best in the universe at everything they do. Trusted trader model isn't that. But if you do need somebody because the worst has happened, or because you just need to buy a product, we will put you towards somebody that at least has got some kind of credentials and is not simply the people that pay the most to be at the top of a Google search. We don't get a kickback from that. That's really, really important to us. It's simply an attempt to put you in the right place so you can get what you need. So that's broadly it from us. I've cantered through kind of what cybercrime looks like, some simple things that you can do, and how we can help. But I know now, because I've been kind of quasi police officer for a year now, and actually a business person, I have to end with a call to action, don't I? So what do I do? Here you go. This is my takeaway. Join us, because we can continue the conversation offline there. So the website details are in front of you there. If you join us, we'll send you through that pack. We'll make follow-up contact. Of course, we can pick up the conversation that we've had today if it's something that we don't run through in Q&A now. You do need, bad news, to spend a bit of time on this, because it's no good us sending you a pack and you filing it in a drawer. You do need to think about your cyber risks. You do need to think about the areas where your most vulnerability lies, and you need to do a little bit of stuff to try and overcome those. Actually, I think that just the understanding about the latest threats is a good part of that, but it's much better if you do engage properly and think about how your passwords are working, what your staff are doing, what training do you need, and some of those other bits, because none of you want that kind of 8,500 bill, I would suggest. I did mention a way back tonight that you need to consider those in your chain. If you're secure, great, I'm really happy for you. Think about the companies that you work with. Our goal is actually to try and make the Southwest a safer place to do business. And so I'd like to make it safer for the companies that are working with you. And I think actually I'd encourage you to ask them those questions. Somebody is doing your marketing, ask them, do they have two-factor authentication on your accounts? Do they train their staff if they've got somebody in writing copy for them? And actually, how do they make sure that the keys to your digital accounts are kept safe, because it's really important, and it is okay for you to ask those questions. And again, we can help those companies with that if you want to refer them on to us. And the last thing from me really is just anything that you do want, please contact us. We are here to be on your side and a bit of an ally, because we recognise that cyber is confusing, it's potentially expensive, it's difficult, it's all those things. But I hope today's presentation has kind of shown you that actually you have got somebody there that will help you. There is a lot of stuff that you can do that's quite simple, and you can enormously reduce your risk. And I would suggest to you, it really is worth doing. So if it feels right, we would welcome seeing you on our membership list fairly shortly, and we'll pick up the conversation. But thank you for listening tonight. If you were having a glass of wine, I hope you stopped at a glass and not the whole bottle. I will end the presentation here and see if we have some questions and answers. So thank you for listening.
Thanks, Mark. That was really, really useful, really interesting. Hope everyone else enjoyed that and picked up some good points. There aren't any questions in the chat, but whilst you have a captive audience, is there anything anybody would like to ask Mark? Stony silence.
Okay, what I'll do, Janet, I'm going to put our contact details again into the chat, just so that people can see our website. So that's
brilliant.
So if anybody wants to follow up, they're welcome to do that. If there are any questions coming out today, we can pick them up at a separate time. So really, really happy to.
Yeah, that's great. So yeah, if you just go onto that website, Mark's explained everything, how you can sign up for the free package, and at least now you've got a name to the face, you know who's behind this and what it's all about. So hopefully you can spread the word, tell other people that run businesses, because there is a lot of useful information there. Okay, so got a couple of comments, everyone saying really useful, so that's good. So if there's no last minute questions, then I'll say thanks to Mark, thanks to everyone for coming, and let's go and enjoy our evening now with that bottle of wine. Thank you.
Thanks, Janet. Cheers.
Bye.